She took care of bleeding man during snowstorm, unaware that he was a feared Mafia boss. In the worst blizzard of the year, a lone nurse finds a stranger bleeding on her porch. She stitches him by lamplight. He whispers, "No police!" Then a red dot slides across the wall. Shadows outside. Someone is hunting him. Armed men rush in and call the stranger Don. The nurse realizes she didn't save a victim. She saved the most dangerous man in the city. Worse, a photo hits her phone, her brother tied to a chair, a message. Debts collect. Now she's trapped between Mercy and the Mafia, guarded by a man who is gentle only to her and lethal to everyone else. If saving one life woke a war, who survives when the storm ends? Her family, her heart, or no one? Through the howling wind and stinging snow, Nora kept her vigil. The stranger's breathing had steadied, but his skin remained too pale, too cool to the touch. She checked his pulse every 15 minutes, her fingers pressed against his throat where stubble rasped against her skin. The power flickered again, making the oil lamps dance. Shadows leaped across the cabin's pine walls as Nora organized her impromptu medical supplies. Bloody gauze pads lay in a neat pile ready for disposal, her stainless steel instruments soaked in alcohol on a metal tray, waiting to be properly sterilized once the power stabilized. Wind rattled the windows, and Nora pulled the quilt higher over his chest. Despite his size, easily 6'3" and solid muscle, he looked vulnerable in sleep. The harsh lines of his face had softened, though tension still pulled at his brow. She'd seen enough injuries in the ER to recognize defensive wounds. The knife graze told a story of a close-quarters fight. The gunshot spoke of distance, a chase maybe. None of it matched his expensive suit or the heavy gold ring on his right hand. The mixing bowl under the leak clinked steadily as pink-tinted water dripped from the ceiling. Nora's shoulders ached from dragging him inside, from holding him still while she stitched his wounds. The adrenaline that had carried her through the initial treatment was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. His phone buzzed again on the coffee table. The screen lit up with another encrypted message, just numbers and letters that meant nothing to her. She'd counted 6 messages in the last hour, each more urgent than the last, judging by their frequency. "You're safe," she murmured when he stirred restlessly. "Just rest." The words felt hollow in the storm-dark cabin. Safe was relative when harboring a mysterious injured man who refused police involvement, but she couldn't have left him to freeze or bleed out on her porch. That wasn't who she was. Nora checked his bandages again, gentle fingers probing for fresh bleeding. The stitches were holding well, neat, even rows that would minimize scarring. Her best work, done by lamplight with makeshift tools. The through and through had missed anything vital, more luck than skill on someone's part. The concussion worried her more. His pupils had been uneven earlier, his responses slightly delayed. She'd have to wake him regularly through the night, standard protocol that felt anything but standard in these circumstances. A particularly fierce gust rattled the cabin's frame. Nora pulled her cardigan tighter and added another log to the wood stove. Heat rolled out in waves, fighting back the creeping cold. The storm showed no signs of letting up, which meant they were stuck here until morning at least. She'd done what she could to secure the cabin. The bookcase blocked the front door, though she doubted anyone else would be foolish enough to travel in this weather. Her medical bag sat ready by the couch, restocked with fresh supplies from her cabin's first aid kit. The needle was still threaded, just in case. The curved surgical steel caught the lamplight as she finally set it aside. Her fingers were stiff from gripping it so tightly. Small crescents dug into her palm, where she'd clenched her fist. Settling into the chair beside him, Nora tried to make sense of the night's events. Her cabin was the only one occupied on this stretch of shoreline during winter. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles down the service road. How had he ended up here, wounded and alone in a blizzard? The man shifted in his sleep, mumbling something in what sounded like Italian. His hand twitched toward his side, where she suspected he usually carried a weapon. The motion sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the storm. Nora checked her watch. Time for another neuro check. She hated to wake him when rest was crucial for healing, but head injuries took priority. Leaning forward, she kept her voice firm but gentle. "Sir, I need you to open your eyes for me." He came awake instantly, too controlled for someone with a concussion. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist before his eyes fully opened. The grip was careful but immovable. "It's okay," Nora said steadily, falling back on years of handling agitated patients. "You're at my cabin. I'm the nurse who treated you. Just need to check your pupils." His fingers loosened but didn't let go entirely. Those dark eyes tracked her movements as she pulled out her penlight. They were clearer now, alert despite the pain she could see him fighting. "Look here," she instructed, checking his pupillary response. Better than earlier, though still slightly sluggish on the left. "Can you tell me your name?" That same flat refusal from before. "No." "How about the year? Who's the current president?" He answered both correctly, his accent less pronounced but still present. His thumb pressed against her pulse point, reading her just as she was reading him. Another branch cracked outside, closer this time. They both tensed, listening. But it was only the storm, doing its best to tear the world apart while they waited it out in this strange pocket of forced trust. Nora slowly reclaimed her wrist when he released it. The skin tingled where he'd held her. She made a note of his responses on the makeshift chart she'd started, aware of his gaze following every movement. The mixing bowl chimed again, marking time in steady drips. The wind howled, and Nora settled back in her chair for another hour of watching over her dangerous patient, the threaded needle gleaming beside her like a promise or a warning. The generator's steady hum broke through the storm's dying roar, bringing warmth and dim light to the cabin's interior. Nora's shoulders relaxed slightly as the electric heaters kicked in, though she kept the wood stove going as backup. The silence felt almost eerie after hours of howling wind. She moved to the kitchen, her steps quiet on the wooden floors. The stock pot heated quickly on the electric burner, a welcome change from the wood stove's unpredictable heat. Steam rose as she stirred the simple broth, the warm scent filling the space. Her patient stirred at the smell, eyes opening with that same unsettling alertness. No confusion, no disorientation, just sharp awareness that seemed to take in everything at once. He sat up slowly, testing the stitches at his side. "Let me check those first," Nora said, moving toward him with fresh bandages. The old ones were soaked through, though more with melted snow than blood now. "How's the pain level?" "Manageable." His voice was deeper now, accent more pronounced. He watched her hands as she worked, neither helping nor hindering. "You have steady hands, piccola infermiera." "Little nurse," she translated, keeping her tone professional. "I prefer Nora." He inclined his head but offered nothing in return. His skin was warm under her fingers as she checked his wounds. No signs of infection setting in. The bullet graze on his shoulder caught her attention, old scar tissue puckered and pale. Professional work, like someone had dug the round out without anesthesia. The faint smell of gunpowder clung to his coat where it hung by the door. Fresh powder, not residue. Her throat tightened, but she kept working, wrapping clean gauze around his torso with practiced efficiency. "Your training," he said suddenly. "Emergency medicine." "Trauma unit." She secured the bandage. 5 years. "And this cabin. How far to the main road?" Nora met his gaze steadily. "Far enough that you're lucky you found me first." His mouth curved slightly, acknowledging the deflection. The movement drew her attention to a thin scar at the corner of his lips, like someone had split it in a fight. Everything about him spoke of violence, from the weapon she'd glimpsed to the way he held himself, controlled power, waiting. "The gun goes on the table," she said firmly, nodding toward his jacket. "I don't treat armed patients." He studied her for a long moment, something almost approving in his expression. With careful movements, he drew the matte black pistol from its holster and set it on, the coffee table, within reach, but not threatening. Nora took his vitals again, noting the improvement. Blood pressure, still lower than ideal, but climbing steadily. His pulse was strong and regular now, the worst of the blood loss compensated for. The concussion symptoms had mostly cleared. The gray pre-dawn light filtered through the windows, turning everything stark and shadowless. Perfect visibility for anyone watching the cabin. The thought had barely formed when she heard it. The distant rumble of engines, multiple vehicles moving slowly along the iced-over service road. Her patient went still, head tilted slightly. His hand didn't move toward the gun, but his entire posture shifted from relaxed to lethal in an instant. He moved to the window in complete silence, checking sightlines through the narrow gap in the curtains. Footsteps crunched on the frozen path outside, multiple sets moving with purpose between the birch trees. Nora's heart hammered against her ribs as the stranger gestured sharply for her to kill the lights. She flipped the switches, plunging them into the pale morning gloom. He moved with liquid grace, positioning himself to cover both her and the entrance. "Behind the wood stove," he ordered quietly. "Stay there." Nora started to protest, but froze as a red dot appeared on the cabin wall, tracking slowly across the rough wood. The sound of the shot was oddly muted, just a sharp crack followed by the dull thud of a bullet embedding itself in the window frame. She ducked instinctively, muscles locking as adrenaline flooded her system. A strong hand gripped her arm, pulling her behind the solid bulk of her patient's body. His skin radiated heat through the bandages as he pressed her back, angling to shield her completely. "With me," he said, voice gone hard as steel. The words vibrated through his back where she was pressed against him, and she could feel the coiled tension in every muscle as he prepared to move. The quiet that followed was absolute. No footsteps, no engines, not even the wind. Just the soft tick of cooling wood in the stove, and their matched breathing, his measured and controlled while hers came in short bursts. Her hands found purchase on his arm, feeling the shift of muscle as he adjusted his stance. Morning light spilled across the floor in pale stripes, broken by moving shadows outside the windows. The generator's hum seemed suddenly loud in the silence, marking time as they waited for the next shot, the next move in whatever game she'd been unwittingly drawn into. The front door shuddered under a heavy impact. Cassian's response was immediate, controlled bursts of gunfire that sent splinters flying from the porch posts. His shots were precise, deliberately missing the attackers while forcing them back. Through the frosted windows, Nora made out the hulking shapes of 2 black SUVs crawling up her snow-covered drive, their engines purring quietly. Men in dark tactical gear emerged, spreading out with practiced efficiency. Their movements spoke of military training. These weren't common thugs. 3 sharp knocks cut through the tension coming from the rear entrance. Cassian's shoulders relaxed a fraction, though his gun remained ready. He moved to the back door with fluid grace, opening it to reveal 2 figures who stepped inside like they owned the place. The woman wore a camel coat that probably cost more than Nora's monthly salary. Her dark hair swept back in a severe twist. Behind her, a man with a web of scars across his face scanned the room with cold efficiency. "Don," they said in unison, and Nora's world tilted sideways. Don Cassian Rubiero. The name hit her like a physical blow. She'd heard it whispered in the ER when gang violence victims came in, cops hovering nervously nearby. A mafia kingpin? She'd spent the night stitching up one of the most dangerous men in the state. The woman, Talia Alvarez, by the way others deferred to her, moved to Cassian's side. "Are you stable?" Her sharp gaze swept over Nora like she was cataloging a potential threat. Outside, the attacking shadows melted back into the tree line, but Nora could feel their presence lingering. The scarred man worked quickly, hauling heavy metal shutters across the windows with practiced movements. "You're criminals," Nora started to say, but the words died in her throat as a silenced shot took a chunk out of the nearest porch post. The sound of splintering wood made her flinch. Cassian turned to her, his expression grave but not unkind. "Dante Morelli will assume your leverage now." His voice was soft but carried absolute authority. "You helped me. That makes you a target. You'll need to come with us until the storm passes." "No." Nora backed away, bumping into the wood stove. "I'm not going anywhere with—" Her phone buzzed in her pocket. The screen showed a photo that stopped her heart. Her brother Evan, slumped in a chair, zip ties cutting into his wrists. Blood matted his hair on one side. Below the image, "Debts collect, nurse." A map pin dropped to an address downtown. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen. Evan's gambling. She'd known it was bad, but this— The room spun slightly as pieces clicked into place. Her brother's increasing paranoia, the bruises he'd tried to hide, his desperate attempts to borrow money. "I'll come," she said finally, voice rough. "But I keep my phone, and my name stays out of this." Cassian nodded once, face unreadable. "Agreed." Talia moved to the wood stove, gathering the bloody gauze and bandages Nora had used. She fed them into the flames piece by piece, methodically destroying evidence of the night's work. The fire flared briefly, consuming all traces of Cassian's presence. The scarred man appeared at Nora's elbow with her coat. She shrugged it on mechanically, mind still fixed on that photo of Evan, the brother she'd practically raised, now caught in something far darker than she'd imagined. Outside, the armored SUV waited, engine running. Snow swirled around it in the pre-dawn light, already filling in the tire tracks. Cassian's hand settled at her lower back, guiding her forward. Despite his injuries, his movements were fluid and controlled. The vehicle's interior was all black leather and bulletproof glass. Nora slid into the back seat, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Talia took the wheel while the scarred man did a final sweep of the cabin's perimeter. Cassian settled beside Nora, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. His presence should have been threatening. This man who dealt in violence and power. Instead, she found herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn to the calm certainty he projected. The SUV's tires crunched over fresh snow as they pulled away from the cabin. Through the tinted windows, Nora watched her safe haven recede into the swirling white. Less than 12 hours ago, she'd walked through that door, expecting a quiet night of rest after her shift. Now she was in a Mafia Don's vehicle, her brother's life hanging by a thread, caught between rival criminal empires. The bloody gauze burning in her wood stove might as well have been her old life, turning to ash with each passing mile. The phone felt heavy in her hands. She stared at the map pin marking Evan's location, memorizing the address. Beside her, Cassian watched the trees for movement, one hand resting casually near his weapon. The storm intensified around them, nature conspiring to hide their escape in a curtain of white. 15 miles felt like an eternity through the storm-lashed streets of Chicago. The SUV carved through snow-choked lanes, its reinforced tires gripping treacherous ice as they approached the glass and steel tower, knifing into the gray dawn sky. Wind howled between skyscrapers, creating miniature blizzards at every intersection, the swirling white particles dancing violently in the headlights. Visibility dropped to mere feet at times, forcing their driver to inch forward with painful slowness, knuckles white on the steering wheel. The underground garage entrance opened seamlessly, revealing a clinical space of polished concrete and surveillance cameras. 2 armed guards materialized from a security station, nodding to Cassian as the vehicle glided to a stop in a reserved bay. Their expressions remained neutral, but their eyes tracked every movement, hands resting casually near concealed weapons. The garage itself was immaculate, no oil stains, no debris, speaking volumes about the standards maintained in Cassian's territory. "Medical supplies?" Nora asked as they took a private elevator upward. Despite his composed expression, Cassian's pallor worried her. The brief glimpse she'd caught of his bandages showed seepage, a darkening stain that had spread since they'd left the cabin. His breathing, while controlled, seemed deliberately measured, a sign she recognized from patients fighting pain. "Fully stocked," Talia answered, leading them into a penthouse that occupied the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a vertigo-inducing view of the storm-wrapped city below. The space was minimalist but luxurious. Italian leather furniture, abstract art on stark white walls, hardwood floors gleaming under recessed lighting. Not a speck of dust anywhere, as though the chaos of the outside world couldn't penetrate this sanctuary. Nora found the medical cabinet in a spotless bathroom, exactly where Talia indicated. She laid out fresh gauze, antibiotic ointment, and surgical tape with practiced efficiency, mentally cataloging supplies that would make many emergency rooms envious. Her phone became a medical chart as she documented the wound care, setting alarms for antibiotic doses. The bathroom's harsh lighting highlighted every detail of Cassian's injury, the precise line of her earlier stitches, the angry red inflammation creeping outward. "What does Dante want?" she asked, carefully peeling away the old dressing. The stitches had held, but the surrounding tissue needed monitoring. She noted increased swelling, making a mental note to check for fever later. Talia, watching from the doorway, answered with clinical detachment. "Territory, humiliation, Dante's family's old guard, losing relevance. Your brother's debt gave him an opening." Her voice carried no emotion, but her eyes narrowed slightly, revealing the calculation behind her words. "Dante collects people as much as money, uses their weaknesses like playing cards." Cassian remained silent through the redressing, his breathing steady and controlled. Only when Nora finished taping the fresh gauze did he speak. "Once Dante is neutralized and your brother is safe, you'll return to your life." His tone carried absolute certainty, as if simply declaring it made it fact. "Until then, this safe house is yours. Guest room, clothes, kitchen, whatever you need." His eyes met hers in the mirror, dark and unreadable. "But," Nora prompted, knowing conditions would follow. Her fingers lingered at the edge of the bandage, making one final adjustment. "No leaving without security. Dante's people saw your face at the cabin." The words were delivered without emotion, but his jaw tightened slightly. "They'll use you to get to me if given the chance." She met his gaze in the mirror, unflinching. "Fine. My condition, no lies about Evan. I need to know everything. Not just what you think I can handle. Everything." She turned to face him directly, arms crossed. Talia and Cassian exchanged a look before Talia nodded. Evan's debt started with a bookie named Klein, small-time operation until recently. When Cassian started pressuring Klein's boss, Dante absorbed the territory. Your brother's markers went with it. She paused, scrolling through her tablet. The debt tripled overnight with new fees. Classic Dante, creating leverage where it didn't exist. The kitchen became Nora's refuge as afternoon bled into evening. She found pasta, olive oil, garlic, Simple ingredients that required focus and repetitive motion. The familiar tasks helped steady her hands, even as her mind spun with implications. The knife moved in a practiced rhythm as she minced garlic, the repetitive motion soothing her frayed nerves. Steam rose from the boiling pasta, fogging a small portion of the window, temporarily blurring the storm outside. Cassian appeared as she was plating the food, moving with careful precision that spoke of his injury. He ate standing at the counter, gaze fixed on the endless curtain of snow beyond the windows. The storm showed no signs of weakening, turning the city into a white blur. Streetlights created dim halos in the darkness, barely visible through the relentless downfall. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but carried easily in the silent kitchen. Your brother's situation is complicated, but not hopeless. A soft chime drew Talia to a tablet displaying garage security feeds. They watched as a man in a courier's uniform lingered near the entrance, face tilted up toward their windows for several long seconds before walking away. The camera caught his profile. Unremarkable features, except for a thin scar tracing his jawline. "Double the night watch," Cassian ordered, voice quiet but sharp. His security team acknowledged via earpieces, melting into strategic positions throughout the building. Talia's fingers flew across her tablet, initiating additional security protocols without being asked. In the guest room, Nora lay fully clothed on top of the expensive duvet, her phone beside her on the pillow. She'd changed the background to Evan's contact photo. Not the brutal image sent by his captors, but an older one from happier days. Her brother's crooked grin seemed to mock her from the screen, his eyes bright and unburdened by the weight of addiction that would later consume him. The room itself was a study in subtle luxury. Thick carpet, automated blackout blinds, designer furniture that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Even the air felt filtered and precise, temperature controlled to the exact degree for optimal comfort. But beneath the sophisticated surface, she sensed the building's true nature, a fortress designed for security rather than comfort. The walls were thicker than standard construction, the windows reinforced, the door frames unusually solid. Nothing was purely decorative. Outside, Chicago vanished periodically behind sheets of snow, the wind's howl muffled by triple-pane glass. 15 floors below, armed men patrolled invisible perimeters while surveillance systems tracked every movement. Somewhere in this same vast city, her brother waited in darkness, caught in a power play between rival criminals. Was he warm? Was he hurt? The questions circled like vultures in her mind. Nora's fingers traced the edges of her phone, mind cycling through everything she knew about Dante Morelli from emergency room whispers. Unlike Cassian's surgical precision, Dante's violence carried a theatrical edge, intended to send messages, to humiliate as much as harm. There had been victims in her ER, broken fingers arranged in grotesque patterns, burns shaped like symbols, injuries designed to leave visible scars as reminders. The thought of Evan in such hands made her stomach clench painfully. She'd practically raised him after their parents checked out, protected him through scraped knees and broken hearts and his first fumbling attempts at independence. She'd bandaged his wounds, helped with homework, scared off bullies, celebrated every small victory. Now his addiction had dragged them both into a world where violence was currency and mercy was weakness. A world where men like Cassian operated by rules she was only beginning to understand. The guest room's temperature was perfectly controlled, the sheets carried the faint scent of lavender, and somewhere nearby, a dangerous man stood guard over her safety. Despite the comfort surrounding her, Nora kept her boots on, ready to move at a moment's notice. Her medical bag sat prepared by the door, restocked from Cassian's supplies. Her phone remained within easy reach, screen dimmed but never dark, waiting for news of her brother's fate. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the city, nature's violence matching the humankind that now threatened to consume her world. The city lay hushed under fresh snow when Nora jerked awake to muted sounds from the living room. Through the half-open door, she heard ragged breathing and low, desperate words in Italian. Moving quietly, she padded to the kitchen for water, then approached the leather couch where Cassian thrashed in the grip of a nightmare. "Cassian!" she called softly, keeping her distance. His eyes snapped open. In one fluid motion, he lunged forward, hand closing around her throat. The water glass crashed to the floor. For a heartbeat, his fingers pressed against her pulse. Then awareness flooded his face. He released her instantly, backing away with horror in his eyes. "Mi dispiace," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I would never." He pressed his palms flat against the wall, physically restraining himself. Nora touched her throat, pulse racing but voice steady. "Focus on the room. Tell me 5 things you can see." He blinked, then complied. "The city lights, your medical bag, The broken glass, the leather couch, your hands. Good. 4 things you can touch. The wall, the carpet. His breathing slowed. My shirt, the cool air. As his hands unclenched, Nora approached carefully, noting the sheen of sweat on his skin. She pressed the back of her hand to his forehead. You're burning up. Let me check the wound. Under the bandage, angry red lines radiated from the stitches. Early sepsis, she said. You need IV antibiotics now. Do you have medical supplies? He nodded toward a hidden panel in the wall. Talia, materializing silently in the doorway, made a call. Within 20 minutes, discreet delivery brought everything Nora needed. As she prepared the IV line, Cassian watched her hands. Father Leona's parish shelter, he said suddenly, voice distant. After my father was murdered, I was 10. The nightmares started there, watching helpless as they shot him. I swore I'd never be helpless again. Nora inserted the catheter with gentle precision, taping it securely. You're not helpless now. You're letting me help. There's strength in that. Throughout the morning, as antibiotics dripped steadily, they established boundaries. Nora could move freely within the apartment, but always under guard. Cassian would share confirmed information about Evan, no speculation, and Nora wouldn't attempt escape, not with her brother's life in the balance. By afternoon, she'd turned the dining room into an impromptu classroom, teaching Cassian's security team basic trauma care. Pressure points, she demonstrated, on a guard named Marco, using rolled towels. Direct pressure with clean cloth. Duct tape works for temporary wound closure if you have nothing else. The men paid close attention, particularly after Cassian nodded approval from his position by the window. Even Talia took notes, her earlier skepticism softening to grudging respect. Your crew should know this, Nora told Cassian as she checked his IV. Ambulances take too long in their line of work. They're learning, he replied, and something in his tone suggested she'd earned a measure of trust. Night fell early, snow still drifting past the windows. Nora stood at the glass, watching ice crystals dance in the security lights far below. The city spread out like a scattered constellation, each light a story she couldn't read. She felt Cassian's presence before she heard him, that distinctive stillness that seemed to alter the air in a room. A soft weight settled across her shoulders, a cashmere blanket still carrying warmth from where it had been folded. Neither moved closer. But in the window's reflection, she caught his gaze on her face, intent and unguarded. Her own breathing seemed loud in the quiet, matching the steady rhythm of his. The space between them hummed with unspoken words and careful distance. The snow continued falling, erasing the hard edges of the city below. Somewhere out there, Evan waited in darkness. But here, in this moment, time seemed suspended, held in the delicate balance between Cassian's presence at her back and the vast white silence beyond the glass. Nora wrapped the blanket tighter, allowing herself to absorb its warmth. In the window's reflection, she watched Cassian's hands flex slightly at his sides, as if resisting the urge to reach out. The IV line caught the dim light, a reminder of vulnerability and trust given against instinct. The moments stretched, fragile as spider silk. Neither spoke, but Nora felt the weight of everything unsaid. His apology for the nightmare, her acknowledgement of his childhood wounds, the strange trust building. Between nurse and patient, captive and captor, 2 people caught in circumstances beyond their control. Around them, the safe house hummed with subtle security, guards at their posts, cameras tracking movement, systems monitoring every approach. But in this midnight quiet, those protective layers felt distant, leaving just this: snow falling endlessly, a shared blanket's warmth, and the careful measure of breath and space between 2 people learning each other's boundaries. The city lights blurred through the snow, creating halos in the darkness. Nora's reflection showed her own face, pale and determined, and behind her Cassian's tall figure, solid as a shadow, but equally still. The blanket draped across her shoulders like a promise of protection, of careful consideration, of something unnamed taking root in the space between them. Just after midnight, the elevator panel chirped. A coded alert flashed on the security screens. An unauthorized car entering the garage levels. Cassian's team moved with practiced efficiency, hustling Nora toward a service hallway. Stay here, one guard said, but Nora shook her head. I'm watching the feeds. She strode to the bank of monitors while Cassian shrugged on a suit jacket over his bandages, concealing the IV port she'd placed hours earlier. On screen, 3 men in maintenance uniforms approached the elevator bay. Their badges looked legitimate, but something in their movement caught Nora's trained eye. The one on the left, Ankle holster. His gates off. Talia's fingers flew across the keyboard, zooming the camera. Confirmed. Cassian descended with 2 guards, his movements fluid, despite injury. Nora's heart hammered as she watched the feed. The maintenance crew tried badging through the secure doors. When access denied, the smallest man reached for his tool belt. Non-lethal, Cassian ordered through the comm. We need them talking. But the situation deteriorated in seconds. The man with the ankle holster panicked, drew, and fired wildly. The shot echoed through the garage's concrete walls. Cassian's response was immediate and devastating. Gone was the patient who'd let her tend his wounds. This was the Don in action, precise, lethal grace as he dropped the shooter with a clean strike to the throat. The second man barely raised his weapon before Cassian disarmed him, the move so swift the cameras barely caught it. The gunshot's reverberations hit Nora like a physical force. Before anyone could stop her, she sprinted for the elevator. The doors opened to controlled chaos. 2 intruders, subdued. 1 unconscious, Cassian's men securing the scene. Cassian crossed to her immediately, hands gentle as he checked her ears. Are you hurt? The echo in here. I'm fine. Her fingers found a fresh cut at his hairline. You're not. Shower, now. That needs cleaning. In the master bathroom, steam filled the air as Nora examined the wound. Superficial, she murmured. But head wounds bleed. I've had worse. His voice was low, intimate in the enclosed space. Hold still. She dabbed at the cut, hyper-aware of his proximity, the heat radiating from his skin. Their eyes met in the mirror. The tension that had been building since that first night in her cabin crystallized into something electric, inevitable. Nora! Her name was a question in his mouth. Yes. She turned to face him fully. But you tell me if anything hurts. Your other wounds, I'll tell you. His hands framed her face. You set the pace. Verbal consent for everything. Everything, he agreed. The first kiss was careful, testing. The second broke their restraint. Steam swirled around them as clothing fell away. Every touch was preceded by a whispered question, every response an enthusiastic affirmative. Nora kept careful watch on his injuries, but Cassian moved with controlled power, lifting her easily. Water sluiced over them as they came together, all heat and need and desperate wanting. Okay? He asked repeatedly. And yes, she answered, and more. Afterward, they dried each other with soft towels, trading gentle touches and lighter kisses. The adrenaline crash left them both trembling slightly. This can't distract from finding Evan, Nora said as they dressed. It won't. Cassian's voice was firm. Your brother remains the priority. In the master bedroom, exhaustion hit hard. Nora lay atop the covers, positioning herself to watch the door. Old habits from too many hospital on-call rooms. Cassian settled on his side, careful not to crowd her. His phone buzzed on the mattress between them. Talia's message glowed in the darkness. Got a lead. Klein is running scared. Neither reached for the phone. For now, in this moment, they allowed themselves to drift towards sleep, separate but aware of each other's presence. The night's violence and passion settled into something quieter, more tentative. Nora listened to Cassian's breathing even out, noted how he kept that small space between them, respecting boundaries even in rest. Outside, snow continued falling, muffling the city's sounds. The security team moved with practiced quiet through their rounds. Her mind cataloged details with medical precision, the fresh bandage visible at the edge of his t-shirt, the way he'd adjusted his position to protect his healing side, the slight furrow between his brows that spoke of pain he wouldn't voice. Even in sleep, he carried the weight of his responsibilities. The events in the garage played behind her closed eyes, the swift violence, yes, but also how quickly he'd shifted back to gentleness with her, how he'd maintained control even while bleeding, how his men had followed his non-lethal order despite being fired upon. There were layers to this man she was only beginning to understand. The Don who commanded through quiet authority, the wounded boy who'd survived Father Leon's shelter, the lover who asked permission for every touch. Nora's clinical mind noted her own responses: elevated heart rate, heightened awareness, the lingering heat where his hands had been. Analyzing helped her process the intensity of what had passed between them in the shower, the trust given and received, the careful navigation of power and consent. The phone glowed again with another message, but neither stirred to check it. Morning would come soon enough, with its demands and dangers. For now, they let themselves rest in this strange peace. 2 people learning to share space, to trust despite circumstances, to find connection in the midst of crisis. Dawn crept over Chicago's skyline as Talia spread surveillance photos across the penthouse's glass dining table. Steam rose from 3 coffee cups, the rich aroma mixing with the antiseptic smell of fresh bandages Nora had just changed on Cassian's side. Klein disappeared from O'Malley's at 2 a.m. Talia's manicured nail tapped a grainy image. Left his phone, wallet, everything. That's not a man running, that's a man being moved. Cassian stood at the window, one hand resting on the bulletproof glass. And Dante? Lost 3 soldiers in last night's attempt. He's getting desperate. Talia hesitated. There's more. The garage codes they used? Only 15 people have that access. We have a leak. Nora watched Cassian's shoulders tighten beneath his dress shirt. His reflection showed no emotion, but she recognized the controlled breathing pattern of someone managing pain. Start quiet pressure on Dante's legitimate businesses, he ordered. Tax audits, health inspections, make it look random. While they strategized, Nora organized medical supplies into go bags, combat tourniquets, hemostatic gauze, broad-spectrum antibiotics. She programmed medication reminders into burner phones, labeling each with color-coded tape for different teams. Smart, Talia commented, watching her work. Our medic could learn from you. Just after noon, they loaded into 3 identical black SUVs. Nora sat beside Cassian in the middle vehicle, her thigh brushing his as they navigated narrow streets. She noticed how he tensed at certain intersections, old memories written in muscle memory. Father Leone's church rose before them, weathered stone and stained glass unchanged by decades of neighborhood transformation. The priest met them at a side door, his lined face lighting with genuine warmth as he embraced Cassian. My boy, he said softly, then turned to Nora. And you must be the angel who stitched him up. These old bones can't kneel anymore, but I thank God for sending you. Inside the church's quiet sanctuary, Father Leone shared coffee from a battered thermos. I've known Cassian since he was knee-high, he told Nora. Him and little Luca both. Pain flashed across Cassian's face at the name. Father Leone reached over, squeezing his hand. She should know, son, about why you are who you are. Luca was 13, Cassian said, voice flat. The bullets were meant for me. Since then! He trailed off. But Nora understood. Every decision, every calculated move, was a wall built to protect others from similar loss. Talia's phone buzzed, breaking the heavy silence. Her face darkened as she read. Evan's debt just tripled. Classic squeeze play. She showed them the screen. And there's movement planned. Dante's Lieutenant Franco is moving collateral to the Wycliffe warehouse at midnight. Evan, Nora breathed, her hands clenched in her lap. We'll get him out, Cassian promised. His tone held absolute certainty. They spent the afternoon planning, then returned to the safe house as darkness fell. Cassian spread blueprints across the kitchen island, walking Nora through every detail of the rescue operation. 2 teams here and here, he indicated entry points. Backup units covering these streets. Franco's crew is good, but they're undisciplined. They'll break formation when pressed. And me? Nora asked. You stay here, no discussion. His eyes met hers. I won't risk you. She studied him, the careful way he moved to protect his healing wound, the precise organization of his plans, the way his men responded to quiet commands rather than shouted orders. She thought about how he'd refused to fire into the trees at her cabin, how he'd ordered non-lethal force in the garage, how he checked sightlines before taking any action. This was a man who planned for contingencies, who valued control over chaos, who would rather take a bullet than risk civilian casualties. A man who asked permission before touching her, who remembered her coffee preference after seeing it once, who carried the weight of his brother's death in every calculated move. Now she lay in bed, staring at the textured ceiling while the city hummed beyond bulletproof glass. Tomorrow's operation spooled through her mind, not with fear, but with clinical assessment. She had seen Cassian's precision in everything from combat to aftercare. She had witnessed his restraint, his strategic mind, his absolute commitment to protecting innocents from crossfire. The choice crystallized. She would trust him with this, not blindly, but based on observed evidence. He had earned it through consistent actions, through kept promises, through the way he balanced necessary violence with fierce protection. Beside her, separated by that careful space, Cassian's breathing remained light. He was awake too, likely running through scenarios, checking and rechecking plans. Another layer of reassurance. He took nothing for granted, left nothing to chance. Nora turned her head, studying his profile in the city's ambient light. The strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows, the way one hand rested near his phone, always alert, always ready. Yet he had shown her his vulnerabilities too. The nightmare, the childhood memories, the ghost of Luca that walked beside him. She reached across the space between them, letting her fingers brush his arm. His eyes met hers in the darkness. "I trust you," she said simply. "With tomorrow, with Evan." He covered her hand with his, a touch full of promise and responsibility accepted. They lay like that, connected but not entwined, while the city's pulse beat steady around their fortress of glass and steel, and plans for tomorrow waited in the wings. The SUV's heater hummed against the biting cold as they parked 2 blocks from the Wycliffe warehouse. Icy needles of sleet tapped against the bulletproof windows, creating a stark rhythm in the darkness. Nora watched Cassian check his weapons with mechanical precision, his movements fluid despite his healing wound. "Put this on," he said, helping her into a heavy coat. The material felt oddly rigid, Kevlar panels sewn into the lining. He fixed an earpiece into place, showing her how to adjust the volume. "Stay in the vehicle with James. He's our best field medic." A stocky man with kind eyes nodded from the driver's seat. Behind them, Marco, another driver, kept watch through the rear window. "Channel 3 is medical emergencies only," Cassian continued, his fingers lingering at her ear. "Channel 2 for status updates. You'll hear everything." His eyes held hers. "Do not leave this car, no matter what." Nora nodded, throat tight. Cassian's team melted into the shadows like ghosts, their dark tactical gear blending with the night. Through her earpiece, she heard controlled breathing and soft footfalls. "North entrance clear," came the first whisper. 2 sentries spotted, moving to neutralize." Nora's hands clenched as the minutes crawled by. Quick scuffles then. "Targets down! No alarms triggered!" Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. The image made her blood freeze. Evan, gagged and zip-tied to a chair, fresh bruises darkening his face. The message below was simple. "Side door, come alone, 10 minutes or he bleeds. Tell the Dawn your brother dies." Panic clawed at her chest. She showed James the photo, mind racing. "They'll kill him if we tell Cassian." The medic reached for his radio, but Nora grabbed his arm. "Please, 60 seconds, that's all I need. Just to the side door. Ms. Vale, I'm not asking permission." She was already moving, slipping out before he could stop her. The sleet stung her face as she sprinted through the shadows. Behind her, Marco emerged silently from the SUV. His footsteps were masked by the weather as he followed, reaching into his pocket. With practiced ease, he planted his burner phone in her coat while she focused on the door ahead. He tapped his concealed mic twice, the signal to Dante's men waiting inside. The side corridor was industrial gray, lit by flickering fluorescence. Evan sat 20 feet away, eyes wide above his gag when he saw her. Relief warred with terror on his face. Then multiple things happened at once. Heavy boots thundered from connecting hallways as Dante's men converged. At the same moment, explosions rocked the far side of the warehouse, Cassian's team realizing the diversion, and launching their assault. Gunfire erupted, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Through the chaos, Cassian appeared like an avenging angel, his face a mask of controlled rage as he took in the scene. His eyes locked onto Nora, then dropped to the phone falling from her coat pocket. The betrayal that flashed across his features cut deeper than any blade. He moved with lethal grace, grabbing her arm and hauling her behind a stack of wooden crates as bullets splintered the walls around them. His body curved over hers, shielding her while he returned fire with his free hand. "Talia!" he barked into his radio, voice like Arctic wind. "Priority 1 is securing the package, then lock her down for transport." Nora tried to explain, but the words tangled in her throat as fresh gunfire forced them lower behind their cover. Through gaps in the crates, she saw Evan being dragged away by Dante's men. Cassian's team was pushing forward methodically, but the warehouse had become a killing ground. The alarms wailed overhead, their piercing shrieks mixing with shouts and gunfire. Cassian's arm was an iron band around her waist, keeping her pressed against him as he calculated angles and trajectories. His breath came in controlled bursts against her hair, but she could feel the tension radiating from every line of his body. "Please," she managed. "Evan." "Not now." His voice could have frozen flame. He keyed his radio again. "Talia, status on extraction." "Working on it, boss. South exit is hot." A bullet punched through their cover inches from Nora's head. Cassian cursed in Italian and shifted their position, somehow maintaining his protective hold while checking sightlines. His earlier tenderness had vanished, replaced by cold, tactical precision. Through her earpiece, she heard his team coordinating, calling out enemy positions and ammunition status. It was organized chaos, every movement purposeful despite the madness around them. Cassian's training showed in how his men flowed like water through the warehouse, adapting to each new threat. But Evan was gone, disappeared into the maze of corridors with his captors. And Cassian's fury at her perceived betrayal radiated like physical waves, his grip on her almost painful as he calculated their next move. The alarms continued their metallic scream as bullets sparked off concrete and metal. Nora could smell cordite and fear sweat, could feel Cassian's heart hammering against her back as he held her in place. His breath was steady, but his voice, when he spoke into his radio again, carried Winter's bite. Converge on my position. We move as one unit to extraction point Charlie, and someone find me Marco. But Marco was already gone, melted away in the initial chaos, his planted phone having done its work. Somewhere in the warehouse, Dante would be smiling at how perfectly his trap had sprung. The penthouse felt like a prison now. Nora paced the guest room's 12-foot length, her shoes silent on plush carpet, while armed men stood guard outside. The city lights sparkled through bulletproof glass, mocking her with their distance. She pulled out her phone for the 100th time, fingers hovering over the keyboard. How to explain that moment of desperate stupidity? That she'd abandoned safety because a stranger had her brother at gunpoint. The words wouldn't come. She deleted another draft, shame burning in her throat. The door opened with a soft click. Talia entered, still wearing her camel coat from the warehouse, her expression professionally blank. She settled into an armchair, crossing her legs with precise movements. "Let's be clear," Talia said, her voice cool but not unkind. "Someone inside our organization fed Dante our route tonight. Your brother's location was bait for a trap, and now we have a burner phone planted in your coat pocket that makes you look like our leak." Nora's hands clenched. "I want to know everything." "You're in no position to make demands." "I'm in exactly that position," Nora countered, "because I didn't betray anyone. Look at the text thread." She thrust her phone at Talia, who took it with raised eyebrows. "The photo they sent of Evan. Look at the timestamp and the light pattern in the background. See that streak across the top? That's from the warehouse's north-facing industrial fixtures. I know because I catalog light sources for wound documentation. Those lights were on hours before we arrived." Talia's expression shifted minutely as she studied the image. "The photo wasn't live. It was staged earlier. They knew we were coming because someone told them, but it wasn't me." Nora leaned forward. "Your driver, Marco, he followed me out of the SUV. Did anyone see where he went during the firefight?" Something sparked in Talia's eyes. "No," she said slowly. "He wasn't on any of the extraction channels." "Because he was already gone." Talia stood, smoothing her coat. "You're more observant than I gave you credit for." She paused. "Your brother is stable, by the way. We have him secured at one of our private clinics. He's sedated while they treat withdrawal symptoms and a cracked rib, but he's under guard and receiving care." Relief made Nora's knees weak. She sank onto the bed, pressing her palms against her eyes. "Thank you." The door opened again and Cassian entered. He'd shed his tactical gear for a fresh suit, but exhaustion lined his face. The cold fury from earlier had faded to something more distant, more final. "The situation is contained," he said, not quite looking at her. "You'll be safe here until we neutralize the threat." "Cassian." "Don't!" His voice was soft but immovable. "I won't risk this operation or my people's lives for feelings." The word fell between them like a blade. Nora flinched. "One chance," she said. "Give me one chance to fix what I broke by leaving that SUV." "No." He finally met her eyes, and the careful blankness there hurt worse than anger. "I protect what's mine. That means containing variables, not introducing new ones." "I'm not a variable to be controlled." "Then what are you?" His question hung in the air, unanswered. After he left, Nora sat motionless for long minutes. The guard's shadow moved across the doorway. City sounds filtered up through thick glass. Her brother was safe but sedated. Cassian was closing ranks, and she was trapped here, a liability, a weak point in his armor. Unless. She'd noticed the laundry corridor earlier when Talia gave her the apartment tour. Service entrance, required by code, with a separate elevator for deliveries. The guard rotation changed at midnight. She'd heard them discussing shifts. Her fingers shook as she found paper and pen in the desk drawer. The note took 3 tries to write, "Cassian, I'm sorry for leaving the SUV. I was trying to save my brother, and I made it worse. But I won't be the weakness Dante uses against you. The photo wasn't live. Check the light patterns against the warehouse schedule. Marco followed me out and planted the phone. I'm going to fix this my way. Bring Evan home. She left it on the kitchen counter, propped against the coffee maker where he'd find it in the morning. The service corridor was unguarded. Why bother when the main entrance had armed men? The elevator required a key card, but the stairs didn't. 23 floors down, her hands steady now, she pulled out her phone and dialed the burner number from earlier. I want to make a deal, she said when they answered. Me for my brother's guaranteed safety, and we do this away from Cassian's territory. The voice that responded was smooth, amused. Bold move, little nurse. Let's discuss terms. Behind her, the service door clicked shut with quiet finality. Above, the penthouse lights gleamed like stars, cold and distant in the winter night. The sleet bit into Nora's skin as she approached the abandoned freight warehouse, her footsteps echoing off corroded metal and broken concrete. Dawn hadn't yet broken, leaving the world in that hollow gray space between night and morning. Water dripped from rusted gutters, creating an eerie rhythm that matched her heartbeat. The side door creaked open before she could knock. Dante Morelli stood there, immaculate in a charcoal suit despite the hour. His smile was all teeth and theater. "The brave little nurse," he said, gesturing her inside with an elaborate wave. "I must say, you've exceeded expectations." The warehouse interior smelled of machine oil and river damp. Chains hung from exposed beams, and sodium lights cast sickly shadows across empty loading bays. 2 armed men flanked a metal chair, bolted to the floor. "Please, have a seat." Dante's courtesy was poisoned honey. "We have so much to discuss." The chains were cold against her wrist as they secured her. Directly ahead, a laptop displayed a grainy feed of another room, sparse, medical, with Evan unconscious on a cot. 2 guards stood near him, weapons visible. "You see, this was never about your brother's gambling habits." Dante circled her chair slowly. "That debt was, let's call it an investment. A carefully crafted lure to answer one burning question. What would it take to crack the unbreakable dawn?" He paused, studying her face. "And you, my dear, proved to be the perfect pressure point. The woman who saved his life, earned his trust, and then—" He snapped his fingers, shattered it. "I didn't betray him." Nora's voice was steady despite her racing pulse. "No?" Dante's smile widened. "Marco, why don't you explain?" A figure emerged from the shadows, the driver's familiar face now twisted with contempt as he held up a phone, the one she'd found in her coat pocket. "Planting this was almost too easy," Marco said. "Just like feeding them the warehouse route. The great Don Cassian, so focused on protecting his nurse that he missed the rot in his own ranks." Nora's mind raced, cataloging details. Distance to exits, guard positions, the steady beep of what sounded like medical equipment from somewhere nearby. The sleet hammered harder against the high windows. Dante wheeled a camera on a tripod in front of her. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to beg, cry a little, tell Cassian you need him. Draw him in nice and vulnerable, and I'll consider letting your brother walk away intact." "No." His smile tightened. "No?" "Not until I see Evan breathing. A current feed, not a recording, with pulse ox readings. You're hardly in a position to make demands. You want Cassian emotional. Show me my brother's vital signs. Let me see he's alive. That'll get a better reaction than fake tears." Dante studied her for a long moment before nodding to one of his men. The laptop feed shifted, zooming in on a pulse oximeter clipped to Evan's finger. The numbers were stable. Oxygen 98%, pulse 72. "Satisfied?" Dante asked. "Keep it visible." He laughed. "You are delightfully stubborn. I can see why he—" A sound cut him off, boots on metal, barely audible over the sleet. Marco's hand went to his weapon as shadows moved past the high windows. Then Cassian's voice rang out, clear and carrying. "I'm here for her. Let the boy go." He stood in the loading bay entrance, coat dark with sleet, hands empty at his sides. The warehouse lights caught the steel in his eyes, the rigid set of his jaw. He'd come unarmed, a power move that made Dante's theatrical posturing look cheap. Nora's breath caught. The note she'd left. He must have found it, read between her desperate lines. Around the warehouse perimeter, his people would be sliding into position, ghost quiet and lethal. Marco raised his gun, but Dante waved him down with a shark smile. "The mighty Don Cassian, walking into my house without protection, for a woman who ran from you." He circled behind Nora's chair, hands on her shoulders. "Tell me, does it burn, knowing she chose to come to me?" "Your quarrel is with me," Cassian said, voice like winter steel. "This game ends now." "Oh no, my friend, this game is just beginning." Dante's fingers dug into Nora's shoulders. "You see, I needed to know if the rumors were true, if the ice-cold Don had finally found his weak spot. And here you are, proving me right." Sleet rattled against metal. In the camera feed, Evan's vitals remained steady. Nora counted Dante's men, 6 visible, probably more hidden. Cassian stood motionless, but she could read the coiled violence in his stillness. "Last chance," Cassian said quietly. "Release them both. We handle this between us." "Where's the fun in that?" Dante's laugh echoed off the warehouse walls. "No, I think we'll stick to my script. The nurse begs, you break, and everyone learns what happens when the mighty fall." Through the sodium glare and shadows, Nora met Cassian's eyes. In that fragment of connection, she saw past his rigid control to the fury beneath, not at her betrayal, but at Dante's twisted game. He had read her note. He understood. The sleet grew heavier, drumming against steel and glass. Somewhere in the darkness, Cassian's people waited for his signal. Dawn crept closer, gray light seeping through the warehouse windows like smoke. "I'm here," Cassian repeated, each word precise and heavy with promise. "Let the boy go." The warehouse plunged into darkness. Glass shattered overhead as the emergency lights died, leaving only the gray whisper of dawn through high windows. In that suspended moment of blackness, Nora heard Cassian move, fluid, precise, deadly. A magnesium flare erupted, painting stark shadows across concrete and steel. Dante's men staggered, temporarily blinded. Through swimming vision, Nora saw Cassian flow through the chaos like smoke, materializing beside her chair. He dropped to one knee, skeleton key already working the cuffs. His hands framed her face, calloused fingers trembling against her skin. "You did nothing wrong," he whispered, voice rough. "I should have trusted you." Gunfire crackled, bullets spanging off metal. Marco bolted for the back stairs, but Talia emerged from the shadows like an avenging ghost, forcing him into a corner. Her gun never wavered. Cassian yanked Nora behind a concrete pillar as rounds chewed the air where she'd been. "Stay close," he ordered, shielding her with his body. Through the smoke and muzzle flashes, she spotted the chemical glow of tactical markers, a path to Evan laid out in phosphorescent breadcrumbs. She ran, following the trail, Cassian a protective shadow at her back. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she shouldered through the door to Evan's room. The guards were down, efficiently neutralized by Cassian's advance team. Evan lay unconscious, pale under harsh fluorescence. Fighting the tremor in her hands, Nora checked his vitals and IV. The bastards had him on a dangerous cocktail. She swapped the drip for saline from her medkit, noting his improving color as the drugs cleared his system. "Help me with the gurney," she called to one of Cassian's men. They strapped Evan down, securing his lines. Through the door's window, smoke curled like river mist. Above, metal rang on metal. Cassian stalked Dante on the catwalk, their shadows stark against emergency exit signs. Dante's theatrical smile had twisted into something ugly. "Look how far the mighty Don has fallen," he sneered. "Compromised by a woman. Your father would be ashamed." "Love is not weakness," Cassian's voice carried clear and cold. His shot took Dante through the thigh, dropping him. As the rival boss crashed to his knees, Cassian zip-tied his hands and passed him to Talia's custody. Keeping his word to spare Nora the site of execution, they were almost clear. Evan's gurney rattled across uneven concrete as Nora steered toward the exit, where armored SUVs idled in the sleet. The sound of a single shot cracked through the warehouse. Cassian spun, taking a round high in the shoulder that was meant for Nora. He dropped to one knee, blood darkening his coat. Without thinking, Nora threw herself over him, hands already reaching for gauze. "Pressure dressing!" she barked, switching to trauma nurse mode. "Someone get me a compression bandage, now!" Her fingers worked swift and sure despite the adrenaline. The bullet had missed major vessels. Through and through, clean exit. She packed the wound, wrapping it tight. "On my count," she ordered his men. "Lift smoothly, support the shoulder. 1, 2. They raised Cassian carefully, following her precise instructions. His eyes never left her face, dark with pain and something deeper. Together they loaded him into the lead SUV, then transferred Evan's gurney to the vehicle behind. Nora wedged herself between the 2 men she loved most in the world as the convoy pulled away. Her hands were sticky with Cassian's blood, but they didn't shake as she monitored both patients. The sleet hammered against bulletproof glass, washing the city streets clean. The private clinic was already prepped. She'd made sure of that days ago, another contingency in her endless planning. Cassian's shoulder would need surgery, but he'd heal. Evan would need time, support, and rehabilitation, but he'd survive. Through the tinted windows, dawn painted the sky the color of old bruises. Nora felt Cassian's fingers brush her wrist, leaving a smear of red. His touch said what words couldn't. Trust given and earned, protection that went both ways, the fierce tenderness that had brought them here. The convoy wound through empty streets as the storm began to ease. In the relative safety of the armored vehicle, Nora allowed herself one shuddering breath. Her brother was alive. Cassian was alive. They had made it through the crucible of Dante's twisted game. She pressed fresh gauze to Cassian's wound, gentling her touch when he tensed. His free hand found hers, squeezing once. A promise, a thank you, an anchor in the storm. Behind them, Evan's vital signs held steady on the portable monitor, each beep A, reminder of what they'd fought to protect. The clinic's underground garage beckoned, a fortress of sterile lights and security. Medical teams waited with gurneys and equipment, everything Nora had specified. She straightened her spine, ready to guide both patients through the next phase of recovery. The night's violence was ending, but their story, this unlikely fusion of criminal empire and healing hands, was far from over. The clinic hummed with controlled urgency as Nora burst through the doors, her mind already mapping priorities. 2 trauma teams waited, equipment ready per her earlier instructions. Evan first, she ordered, directing his gurney to Bay 1. Get me a complete tox screen and start withdrawal protocols. Her brother's shallow breathing concerned her most. She inserted an airway and adjusted his oxygen levels while nurses drew blood and attached monitors. Push 5-amylogawas diazepam for the tremors, Nora instructed, watching Evan's vitals stabilize. Start him on fluids and thiamine. I want constant monitoring for seizure activity. She programmed the withdrawal protocol herself, double-checking each medication dose. Only when Evan's reading steadied did she allow herself to turn to Bay 2, where Cassian waited with characteristic stillness despite his wounds. His shoulder needed immediate attention, but she also needed to check the older injury that had brought them together. This is becoming a habit, she murmured, cutting away his blood-soaked shirt. The shoulder wound was clean. Through and through, missing major vessels. She irrigated it thoroughly, her hands gentle but sure as she worked. The flank wound held, she noted with professional satisfaction, examining her earlier stitches. No infection. You followed medical instructions better than most of my ER patients. Outside the treatment room, Talia's efficient machine moved into action. Through the glass, Nora glimpsed controlled chaos as security teams reported in. Marco had been caught trying to flee through a riverside warehouse. Dante's network was being systematically dismantled, their loyalists identified and removed. True to his word, Cassian had ordered the messier aspects of cleanup kept away from Nora's direct view. She was placing the final sutures in Cassian's shoulder when his eyes fluttered open, dark with pain and something fiercer. He tried to sit up immediately. Don't you dare, she warned, pressing him back with gentle fingers. Let me finish. Nora. His voice was rough. I was wrong. I should have trusted you. No excuses, no defensiveness, just raw honesty that made her hands still on the bandage. I failed you, he continued, catching her wrist in a loose grip. I let fear cloud my judgment. Since you came into my life, I can't. He swallowed hard. I can't breathe without you now. Nora finished securing the dressing before meeting his gaze. Then listen carefully, she said, voice steady despite her hammering heart. I need 3 things from you. Complete transparency, my right to choose, and your word that you will never use me as a strategic piece in your game. Without hesitation, Cassian reached for the sleek pistol at his side. With deliberate care, he placed it on the bedside table and slid it away, a profound gesture of trust in his world. You'll never be a pawn, he promised. I'll be your shield, not your cage. Everything I am, everything I have, it's yours to accept or walk away from. In the next bay, Evan's monitors beeped steadily. Nora checked his readings again, adjusting his medication drip. His color was better, vital signs strengthening. In a few days, he'd be stable enough for transfer to a rehabilitation facility. Cassian watched her work, his expression softening. When he's ready to move, you'll have a choice, he said quietly. I can arrange new identities, a clean slate for both of you far from Chicago. Or, he paused, vulnerability raw in his eyes. Or you can stay. No strings except honesty. No demands except truth. Nora thought of her cabin by the lake, of the simple life she'd planned, but she also thought of the lives they could save together, the good they could do with his resources and her skills. She thought of the man who took bullets for her, who kept his promises, who looked at her like she was the answer to questions he'd never dared ask. "I'm staying," she said simply. "We'll build something better. Something that helps heal what's broken out there." Relief crashed across his face, quickly masked but profound. He shifted carefully in the bed, making space beside him on his uninjured side. Nora hesitated only a moment before settling next to him, her head finding the hollow of his shoulder. The clinic settled into night shift quiet. Monitors pulsed soft green in the darkness. Evan's breathing had deepened into natural sleep, his withdrawal symptoms carefully managed. Outside, Chicago's endless snow had finally turned to cleansing rain. Exhaustion caught up with Nora all at once. She felt Cassian's fingers thread through hers, his thumb tracing her knuckles in a soothing rhythm. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to truly rest, knowing both her patients were stable and protected. In the doorway, Talia paused on her rounds, taking in the scene. The feared Dawn cradling a trauma nurse like she was made of glass, the brother healing under their combined guard, the strength in such gentle moments. Her slight nod held approval, and perhaps something like hope before she moved on, leaving them to their hard-won peace. Rain drummed against bulletproof windows, washing away the last traces of violence. Cassian's breathing evened out beneath Nora's cheek as he drifted between sleep and waking. His hand remained curved protectively around hers, even in rest. The night deepened. Monitors beeped their steady reassurance. And in a fortress built for healing, 3 people who had fought their way through fire began to rebuild from the ashes, stronger for having been broken and mended together. Through the clinic's tall windows, spring sunlight warmed the polished brick floors of Luca House. Nora adjusted a blood pressure cuff on a teenage girl's arm while monitoring the steady flow of people seeking care. The space hummed with purpose, a testament to second chances and quiet redemption. 2 weeks had transformed the abandoned building into a beacon. Clean white walls, well-stocked supply cabinets, and a staff trained to ask no questions while providing expert care. The foundation's paperwork, masterfully handled by Talia, ensured complete anonymity for both donors and patients. "Your pressure's good," Nora told the girl, writing notes in her chart. "Come back next week so we can check how the medication's working." The teen nodded, clutching a paper bag of prescriptions paid for by the clinic's fund. As she left, Nora caught sight of Cassian through the office window, his suit jacket draped over a chair as he assembled metal cot frames with precise efficiency. He looked up, catching her gaze with a slight smile that still made her heart skip. The Don who commanded an empire with iron control now spent his evenings here, learning to channel his protective instincts into something healing rather than harmful. Earlier that day, he'd arrived with takeout for the staff, not ordering them to eat, but asking if they were hungry. These small shifts in his behavior revealed the man beneath the power, the one who chose to build rather than break. Father Leone visited often, blessing each new room and counseling them both. He'd told Nora how Cassian used to slip into the church late at night after Luca died, rage and grief warring in him until dawn. Now the priest saw peace gradually replacing that old pain. "Your brother would be proud," Father Leone had said softly to Cassian while blessing the clinic's entrance. "This place honors his memory by protecting the innocent." In their private moments, Cassian's tenderness took Nora's breath away. He touched her like she was precious but never fragile, respected her boundaries while making it clear she was his entire world. She kept her apartment, her independence, her career, and he kept his word about transparency, including her in decisions that affected them both. Evan's recovery progressed steadily at the private rehabilitation center. 6 weeks seemed daunting at first, but he threw himself into the work with determination. Weekly family dinners became their ritual of reconnection, with Talia's quiet presence ensuring security while giving them space to rebuild trust. The city whispered about changes in the underworld. Some said the fearsome Don had gone soft, but they didn't see him in council meetings, surgically dismantling threats to his people. They didn't understand that his mercy was a choice, not weakness. "Last patient's done," Nora announced, finishing her charts as dusk painted the clinic walls in amber. She watched. Cassian stacked the final cot against the wall, his movements efficient despite the day's labor. "Walk you home?" he asked, shrugging on his jacket. The spring air held a lingering chill as they stepped outside. Cassian's hand found the small of her back, a gesture both protective and reverent. They passed storefronts coming alive with evening lights, puddles reflecting the sky's deepening blue. "The youth outreach program starts next week," Nora said, thinking of the plans they'd drawn up together. Father Leone found 3 more counselors willing to volunteer. Cassian nodded, pride evident in his expression. "Talia's vetted them thoroughly. They're good people." He paused, reaching into his pocket. "Speaking of next steps." The key he placed in her palm gleamed gold in the streetlight, not his usual platinum-plated style. This was warmer, more personal. A key to his penthouse, she realized, but offered as a question rather than a demand. "Only if you want it," he said softly. "On your terms always." They reached her doorway, where everything had changed that snowy night weeks ago. Rain began to tap against the windows, gentle as whispered promises. Cassian's forehead pressed to hers, his breath warm against her cheek. "You're mine," he murmured, "and I'm yours." Nora curled her fingers around the key, feeling its weight, the weight of choice, of trust hard-won and carefully tended. She thought of their separate worlds merging gradually, naturally, like winter melting into spring. "Yes," she said simply, watching joy break across his face like sunrise. The rain picked up, drumming steadily now, but neither moved to go inside just yet. They stood together in the growing dark, holding this moment of certainty, of futures freely chosen and love built on bedrock of truth. Behind them, the city pulsed with new life, winter's grip finally loosening. But here in this doorway, between one season and the next, they had already found their thaw, in trust given and earned, in power tempered by tenderness, in the quiet victory of choosing each other every day.